Then let's start with a moment of prayer. Thank you, Lord, for letting us get together, both physically and in reality, in the Spirit. Give us a remembrance of our youth and our upbringing, and remind us of how those people today who are young are going to have to grow up in this society, and how we need to show them where the Lord is and how the Spirit can guide them. This thing we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we're going to start with the easy one, and that's the Gospel of Luke. Okay? 2nd chapter, 39th verse. And I'll read it because it's already up here. And it's really short. It says, when they had performed everything according to the law of the Lord, they, this is Joseph and Mary, returned to Galilee to their own city of Nazareth. Simple, isn't it? Please remember, Luke never met Jesus, as far as we know. He may have, but he would have been a child at the time. So, and he's writing to a Gentile audience. He's summarizing things. This letter to Theophilus,
So do we know? We don't really know that somebody by the name of Luke wrote the gospel. He could have written it in honor of Luke.
We have no knowledge of any of the 4 gospels, actually.
Right.
Those are
That's
all
what I
added
thought.
into who wrote them. We use the names traditionally.
Sure.
Okay. We do know by the structure and the way it's worded and the way it's handled that Luke is writing to a Gentile type audience.
Right.
Okay. He's summarizing it, which is what he says in the book of Acts. He says, I'm summarizing this for you. Okay? So anyway, down here in Jerusalem, they do what they're supposed to do. Mary is purified, and then they all go back to Nazareth. That's real simple. Is that what happened, though?
Right.
Well, the problem is Matthew doesn't say it that way. So let's go to the Gospel of Matthew, the 2nd chapter. Verses 19 to 23. I don't even know if you can read it. Yeah, you barely can. Okay. Okay, someone care to read it, please?
Matthew 2:19 to 23.
19 to 23.
I can get it. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and they went to the land of Israel. When he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea, in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene.
Okay. Anything striking? Remember, they're in Egypt. That is, in Kadesh Barnea, in the Egyptian territory, probably, living off the gifts that were given to them by the Magi. And they've been there for some time. Okay, and we'll find out more about that in a little while. Now, it's odd, isn't it? Is there something in here that seems a little strange to you?
Well, one, if God tells him to go back to Israel, you would presume that all is well.
Yeah.
And yet then he hears about this scary thing and diverts his...
And has to get another message in another dream.
Yeah.
That's a little not what we expect. However, his first message may not have been clear enough. I want you to go back. The person who was seeking his life is dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was that person? Herod the Great. Remember, slaughtering all the babies there for 2 years old and less. Okay? He's dead. Maybe the angel forgot to mention that his son Aurelius was coming to the throne and he was as bad as ever. Maybe you really ought to kind of maybe go north a little bit and get away from him. It's just unusual for have it said in this way. 2 visions to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what it says.
Yep.
Anything else strike you there?
Well, it didn't describe Mary as his wife. It said the child and his mother.
Mother.
Which seems like an odd choice of words.
I agree also there. Remember, we have this thing about engaged, married, whatever.
But at this point, I mean, I can understand him saying, if Joseph were talking, the child and his mother, because he's not the father.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems like an odd way to word the scripture.
I agree. It's an odd way to do it. Well, his mother, whatever her name is, her mother. Oh, come on, go back to the Midwest. You remember all along, men call their wives mother because they're used to telling it to the children to call them mother. So they're in the habit of calling their wife mother.
Right.
Yeah.
I could never get used to that, but it's the way it is.
I can remember my dad saying, "Go get your mother," but that's a different thing from him referring to her as mother.
Yeah, it's really strange.
My dad used to say that to my mother to get her go, and then she said, "I'm not your mother."
I'm not your mother.
Find your own socks.
That's a good one.
Okay. I love it. Anything else that strikes you here? If not, here we go. Now let's find out some information for a change. Herod the Great, and by the way, this is in April of 4 BC. Okay? And it's going to be in Nazareth. Herod the Great ruled as king for over 40 years. 2 aspects of his life must be noted. We've got to know something about Herod here. Okay? To consolidate and perpetuate his power, the traits that best describe Herod were paranoid, ruthless, and vicious. These are words we don't really want to use for our president, for example, but that's the way it is here. Okay? He drowned his brother-in-law, Aristobulus. He had his own brother killed. He had the high priest, I can never pronounce the name, killed. He had his sister Salome's husband killed, and then had her new husband killed. He had 10 wives at different times. He killed Miramani, whatever, the one he really liked. He really liked her. She was a Jewish lady and legitimized his throne. Okay? He had her killed as well as his own mother. He eventually had the 2 sons of Miramani killed. He was every bit as bad as the Roman rulers. Don't think of this guy as a nice guy in any way, shape, or form. When it comes to maintaining his power, nothing will stand in his way, not even killing a bunch of children.
And it was all about him, obviously.
All about him.
Yep.
Okay? But he's got problems. At the same time, he was very generous spending public money, taxes, on building projects. He built pagan temples in neighboring countries. The theater and the amphitheater in Jerusalem. 8 fortresses, such as Herodium, Masada, and Machaerus, or however it's pronounced. This one we'll get back to later. 8 fortresses based on public money, and these are not cheap. Okay? To which he could escape in case of rebellion. He was not well liked.
Yeah.
Duh.
Right.
Okay? The harbor, he had this whole jetty and harbor built out here in Caesarea. An amphitheater in Caesarea, he built this. Very good at spending money. And the temple complex in Jerusalem. Why did he do all of these things?
Well,
Best guess.
so in part, he probably was trying to get the people in the area to support him when he did the
Correct.
temple,
Correct.
or even the temples for the foreign gods.
He's trying to get some kind of
Yeah,
build public PR.
He wanted to
yeah,
look
public
important.
support.
What?
He wanted to look important.
Yes. And he did it for his ego.
Yeah,
Right,
I did this.
right.
You know. That's probably not the best qualification for a leader, in my opinion.
Mine too.
Yeah.
but so there is some history. King Cyrus sent everybody back to Jerusalem when had been gone 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
He paid their way back and paid to rebuild the temple.
Yes.
So, and of course we know King Cyrus did that, probably for political reasons as well.
Of course.
We also know he did that other than for the Jewish people.
That's right.
But Cyrus did not, as far as we know, he had armies that went in and attacked these nations, and he became the world leader at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I know, we don't have records of Cyrus doing the brutal things, other than maybe leading an army.
Yeah, we don't have any in the general records that I know
Yeah.
of.
But Herod clearly was just ruthless.
Well, Herod had the mistake of having Josephus write about him. And Josephus wrote the history of this guy and told us all about this good stuff. So I just want you to understand how insecure he was and how determined he was to continue his rule over a people who didn't like him at all. Okay? Around 4 BC, Herod's health was very poor. Okay? He was almost 70 years old. I'm only 70, I'm a young man. He was in constant pain and ate obsessively as a distraction. Just to have some stimulation, he would eat. That can't be good for you. Okay? But he did it to distract himself from his pain, from what we understand. Thank you, Josephus. His belly was bloated. His feet were swollen. His breath had a stench. And he had considerable trouble breathing. He's not in good health. He had convulsions. Moreover, as his end was near, his genitals were infested with worms. Many considered his health problems to be God's punishment on Herod the Great. And Josephus is the one who tells us all about this stuff. He's the greatest Jewish historian of the time. And so this is simply where he tells us about all of this kind of stuff and how he dies. Okay. During the night of March 1213, so it's March, the evening of the 12th, the morning of the 13th, of 4 BC, there was an eclipse of the moon. That's record. That's not a problem. Passover Day fell on April 11th that year, and the festival of unleavened bread lasted until April 18th. We have these dates firmly established. A letter came from Caesar allowing him to kill Antipater, the son of his first wife, and Herod had him killed immediately. Oh, yeah, it was because he suspected him of some attempt to take over the rule. Take over his rule. He's 70. He should be turning it over to somebody. But he's killing them off because they're threatening his throne. Okay? So this is what happens right at that time, right around the time of Passover. Then, knowing that he also was dying, he kills this kid even though he is dying and he knows it. He's got real problems. This guy's psycho. And to avoid the celebration the people would likely have following his death, everybody, he knows it, they're going to cheer. Okay? Herod became determined that the whole nation would mourn something when he died. Herod had the leading citizens arrested and gathered in the hippodrome in Jericho. They were supposed to be slaughtered as soon as he died. And he died in late March of 4 BC. This is one of the reasons we know why Jesus was born before that. Because Herod the Great had to order the slaughter of the innocents. We know that Jesus was born before that time. Questions, thoughts, or comments so far?
Why didn't somebody kill him years before?
Because he killed them off first.
Oh,
He was a political
Nobody
survivor.
better
Yeah.
at it than him. Oh,
Well, remember, our situation is different from theirs. He runs the country by terrorism, by fear, by the army. Okay? If our president attempted that, there would be a revolution.
But look at some of the others, Idi Amin, Castro. I mean, there were, throughout history, we've had a lot of these people.
Oh, yes.
And they have protected themselves by being surrounded by their army.
Pol Pot, Hitler, Mussolini,
Yeah.
yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
So, Stalin. So here we go. Same kind. People, it is in the human nature to do this. You and I resist it because we don't have all the power needed to do that. There always going to be someone who is going to attempt it. Always. It's in the human condition. Okay? Anything else? Okay, and so it was that after almost a year in Egyptian territory, Hosea says in 11:1, when Israel was youth, I loved him. Out of Egypt I called my son. Was this referring to Jesus? No, it was referring to Moses and bringing the people out of Egypt, his son. Okay? But it's now prophecy is the way they understand it. It's prophecy about Jesus, the Messiah. Okay? We cannot understand it quite the way they do. We're just not allowed to do that. We have to understand it their way. Okay? Joseph received a message that Herod the Great had died. He could now, he decided, take his wife and son home to Bethlehem. Bethlehem, not Nazareth. He was going back to his folks' place. Okay? Survival had not been easy. Living among strangers as a refugee happens all the time. Always people like that. They packed up and headed home to Joseph's hometown of Bethlehem of Judea. But when they arrived in Bethlehem, they learned that Archelaus, now let me show you something about him. According to Josephus, and indeed, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which would be happening about this time, which was now at hand, and is by the Jews called Passover, and used to be celebrated with great number of sacrifices, and an innumerable multitude of the people came out of the country to worship. After which, they betook themselves to the sacrifices, as if they had done no mischief, nor did it appear to Archelaus that the multitude could be restrained without bloodshed. So he sent his whole army upon them, the footmen in great numbers, multitudes, by the way of the city, and the horsemen by the way of the plains, who, falling upon them on the sudden, as they were offering their sacrifices, destroyed about 3,000 of them. So all of a sudden, Archelaus, right here around Passover time, slaughters 3,000 Jews. He may not be the nicest character either. just like Daddy. And when Joseph realizes that, okay, let me finish here. Now ruled in place of his father Herod, and was every bit as bad. Archelaus had 3,000 people killed in the temple in Jerusalem during Passover because they had embarrassed him. Ego. You can't let anybody get away with anything if you're that kind of rule. Think of Kim Jong-un in Korea. You can't let him get away with anything. Okay? Because they start seeing it as weakness, then they attack. So Joseph chose to go north and live in Mary's hometown. Mary's family was there. It was a quiet village away from the intrigue of Jerusalem, and Joseph was known there and could find work in the area. Therefore, they settled in Nazareth of Galilee. Any questions, thoughts, or comments? It's only recorded in the one gospel. The other one says, hey, he just went straight home. It was no big deal. So we see that each one has different, I'll call them stories, that have different information about the childhood of Jesus or the ministry of Jesus, because that's why we have four gospels.
They're really not contradicting each other.
No, they're not. Not at all. It's just that while he says, well, they went home, well, they went home this way instead.
Yeah.
You don't worry about it, just the way it is. Okay, are we good?
Mm-hmm.
In that case, we're going to go on. Okay, and I need to get rid of this one. And let's find out where these stories are. The Gospel of Luke. Chapter 2, verse 40. Uh-oh, this must go quick. Because it reads simply, the child continued to grow and become strong, increasing in wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Well, that's it. That's just God. That's the childhood. We're done. That's all it tells us, right? What does that tell you? Any questions, thoughts, or comments about this?
It doesn't tell us much.
No, it doesn't.
I've always wondered a lot about Jesus' actual childhood, his friends, how he interacted. Was he aloof? Was he?
What was his personality?
Yeah.
How did he relate to people?
Yeah.
Was he pretending to be God, to them, or was he somehow humble? Did he know what he was doing? What? Yeah. What? And this is all we have.
Yeah.
I bet he was humble.
You want him to be humble. You don't know anything. But what we do know is that he grew up in wisdom and the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we're told. So I'm going to fill you in.
Okay.
You don't mind that? Okay, here we go. 4 BC to 7 AD. That's about 11, 12 years. You don't count the two zeros, you see. So it's 4 plus 7 is 11.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Let's find out what it was like. What was Nazareth like? Have you ever thought about that? No. Well, what was it like to grow up? What was this town like?
Well, it sounded like it was a quiet village and wasn't well thought of by the rest of the country. Like they looked down on it, kind of.
They sure did. Like, what good could ever come out of that place?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
So, let me explain it, describe it to you a little bit. It was an unwalled, that means unprotected, village. You needed walls to prevent bandits, armies, whatever, from getting to everybody. You had to have a secure place at night. They didn't. There were no walls. It's an unwalled village of some 200 to 400 people. That includes men, women, and children. Grandparents, everything. The whole total was somewhere around 200 to 400. Now, if it's a family of 5, grandparent, 2 parents, and 2 children, okay, 5 divided into 200 is what? 40 families. That's all, folks.
Could easily have been less families than that.
Could have been less, could have been a few more. But there are limits to how big it could get, and here's why. It was off the main road. That's a good thing. Small, built on a hillside facing east. Rising sun, you can see it coming up in the east. Okay? There was one source of water for the entire village. This is it today. It's called the Well of Mary. Okay? That's the whole source of water year-round for these people. That's why it does limit the number of people that could live there. Needless to say, in their time, it wasn't all done like this. It was a well. You actually let your skin or your bucket down and drew it up. Okay? Any question, thought, or comment yet? No, the water does not run like this at all times. It's not a spring. Okay? This just happens to be a nice time of day when it's rolling, a nice season. And this one spring limited the number of people who could live in the village. A house was made of mud brick with a dirt floor. I know how much you ladies prefer a dirt floor. And a raised platform in back of the one room for the family to sleep on. So you have the single room, and it's not big. And across the back, you have a small platform. We talked about that, where the family gets up there. And what's this floor used for? Everything else, including bringing in the animals. If you happen to have animals during the winter, you bring them inside to help warm the house and to keep them from dying. Yeah. You do what you have to do. And everybody did it. It's a village. It's not a city.
Africa has many homes like that today.
Even today.
Yeah, I have seen them, yeah.
Okay. Did you go into them?
Oh, yeah.
And when you went into them,
Well,
did you note an odor of any sort?
let me rephrase that.
Okay.
No, we went to them.
To them.
Because you do not bring a guest inside your home, you bring something for them to sit on out of the home.
Oh, interesting. So you're out in the courtyard area.
Well, it's not a courtyard, it's just a square mud brick building with a thatched roof. But they'll bring chairs out in front, and whatever the nicest chair is going to be the guest of honor is going to be sitting in that one.
Okay. And these are typical Target plastic chairs, right?
Well, yeah, some of them are.
Really?
Some of them are made out of wood.
Okay.
Sometimes it might be a plank with a rock under the end. But
Okay.
yeah, it's
Okay.
whatever they have.
Okay. So
But-
you did not get to go inside.
Yeah, to go inside would be into their personal space, and you don't do that.
Correct. That's family space.
Yeah.
Okay. I will suggest that it probably had.
I have been in a couple of houses, but they were better off than
Okay.
that.
Okay. Any other thought on these houses, this house they would be living in? Okay.
When I first met Hazel Johnson, which he might not know, but you know Hazel, and she was in that little house up across from Highland School. The kitchen was a dirt floor. That's-
Or at least when you spill something, it just soaks into the ground, right?
She was left with those 3 little kids to raise, and
Wow.
gradually she got, and she turned out one great.
See how well we have it today? We are so wealthy in this country. Our lives are really comfortable.
A lot of people.
Yeah. The rest of the world is not so fortunate as we are, and we need to keep remembering that. Okay. A house was made on one floor for the family to sleep on. The people tended flocks of sheep, which might look something like this, on the hillside. Notice that hillside is not really green.
Yeah.
You have to move around. Or you might have goats up along the hillside. Goats can eat more stuff, almost anything, but they leave the area completely wiped out. You can't afford, cattle could not survive on this, but a goat can. So you raise goats primarily, and then sheep for other things like wool. Okay? and or raised crops such as flax, barley, or maybe even wheat sometimes, but that's a kind of an expensive person's food. Okay? Barley was typical. That's a poor person's food. It's rougher grain. It grinds out your teeth, so you lose your teeth earlier in life, but it's what you can grow. Okay? They had grapevines, fig trees, and olive trees. Olive was a gift of the gods. You can eat the fruit, properly processed, the oils used in all your cooking as baptisming, everything. Olives were the gift of the gods, according to the Greeks. Okay? These are young olive trees. They can't be more than 100 years old. And I took that picture when I was over there.
Well, some of the olive trees are really old. They don't even know how old.
A couple thousand years. I will show you eventually one that I know is 2,000 years old.
And they still produce?
Oh yeah. It doesn't look pretty like these.
Don't close that one.
No, it has, oops, I killed it, a whole thing off. There we go. That figures, just my luck. Let's go back and do it again. And we're looking at childhood of Jesus. So I'm getting there. Don't worry about me. I'm doing okay here. Okay. Joseph was a handyman. However, to make real money, he would do work in the nearby fast-growing city of Sepphoris, about an hour's walk, about 4 miles to the north. Okay, I'm going to show you the map. I'll point it out. He lived here in this village of Nazareth, and he walks about 4 miles up to Sepphoris. That's his commute. In all probability, he's a skilled laborer. He's a handyman. He can do stuff to help out the ones who are building the city, doing whatever they want. He's just labor, but he's going to get paid money, and they could use the money. Okay, so I suggest, it doesn't say he did, I think he did, is he commuted back and forth whenever he could get work up there. I mean, we have people in down California area who come up from Mexico to work. In fact, they come all the way up here to harvest. They did, I don't know if they still do, to harvest plants, fruit and such, and they send money home. This is normal behavior for the working person. Any questions, thought, or comments so far? Antipas, son of Herod the Great, and ruler of the region of Galilee, was building Sepphoris to be the new capital of the Galilee. Nicely located, right there, Sepphoris. It would eventually have a population of around 20,000, most of whom would be Romans and Greeks. Servants might be Hebrews. But you can't trust them. You cannot trust Hebrews, the Jews. Why? Galilee was a hotbed of revolution, of revolt. You had gangs going around and attacking Romans, good Greek citizens. You had raids going on. This was a hotbed of revolution. You have to be careful if you're going to hire a Hebrew. Okay? Joseph, with his son, when he was old enough, would commute to Sepphoris to work. Now, how old would a child be, a little boy, to do work?
Pretty young in those places.
7, 8 years old, he can do some work, earn a couple of coins. Mm-hmm. Hey, and he can walk 8 miles a day, get to work. Remember, this is Joseph's eldest son. Mm-hmm. So he's going to train him in his own job, his own, whatever I'm saying. So I suspect that Jesus was taken to Sepphoris to work with Joseph. And it would keep him out of his mother's hair. And it would teach him how to be a man. There's all sorts of good reasons for doing this. Okay? What kind of child was Jesus? And this is what you've always wanted to know. Okay? There are some stories we have for that, to tell us about that. For example, when he was 5, he made 12 clay birds. He molded them, like kids will do, right? Then he clapped his hands, they became alive and flew away.
Oh,
You didn't know that, did you?
no, I didn't.
Where does that come from?
Well, I'm sure glad you asked.
The
The Gospel of Thomas tells us this story.
Okay.
When the boy Jesus was 5 years old, there were also many other children playing with him. Now, when a certain Jew saw what Jesus was doing in his play on the Sabbath, he was at once went and told his father Joseph, "See, your child is at the brook, and he has taken clay and fashioned 12 birds." 12, what an interesting number. "And has profaned the Sabbath by working on the Sabbath." But Jesus clapped his hands and cried to the sparrows, "Off with you!" And the sparrows took flight and went away chirping.
Oh, my goodness.
You didn't know that, did you?
No.
Yeah. Wow, that would be impressive, wouldn't it? Well, let's keep going then. When he was around 6, a young man was cutting wood with an axe. When he missed and split his foot open, Jesus healed it. You didn't know this?
No.
Well, look, I can read the whole story to you if you wanted. After a few days, a young man was cleaving wood in a corner, and the axe fell and split the sole of his foot, and he bled so much that he was about to die. And when a clamor arose and a concourse of people took place, the child Jesus also ran there and forced his way through the crowd and took the injured foot, and it was healed immediately. You didn't know that, did you? Well, these are stories we have. Let me read you a couple more here. When he was 8, Joseph was making a bed. One of the boards was too short, so Jesus stretched it longer. Right? Here's the story. His father was a carpenter and made that time plows and yokes. And he received an order from a rich man to make a bed for him. But when one beam was shorter than its corresponding one, and they did not know what to do, the child Jesus said to his father Joseph, "Put down the 2 pieces of wood and make them even from the middle to one end." And Joseph did as the child told him. And Jesus stood at the other end and took a hold of the shorter piece of wood and stretching it, made it equal with the other. You didn't know that. Oh, darn. 10. When Jesus was around 10, his younger brother James was gathering wood when a snake bit him. As James lay dying, Jesus breathed on the wound, and the pain left, and the snake died, and James got well. There. Joseph sent his son James to bind wood and take it into the house. And the child Jesus followed him. And when James was gathering the sticks, a viper bit the hand of James. And as he lay stretched out and about to die, Jesus came near, breathed on the bite, and immediately the pain ceased, and the creature burst. And at once James became well. You didn't know that? You would have known Jesus a lot better if you'd known these stories. I'm surprised you didn't know them. I'm setting you up, by the way. Okay, don't worry, it's a setup here. Okay? So, question. Does that sound like the Jesus you know? Be careful how you answer. I told you I'm setting you up.
I think it does.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Good. Why yes?
Well, because Jesus throughout his ministry did things that
Right.
was to the benefit of other
Yeah.
people.
That's right. Why no?
Well, because when his mother asked him to take care of the missing wine at the wedding, he said, "Don't you know it's not my time yet?"
Oh,
Forgot about that part,
Not
didn't
time
you?
to do that.
And that was when he was almost 30. So if it wasn't his time yet at 30, why was he doing it when he was a kid?
And wouldn't people think this was really odd?
Yes.
Not get
Would you, if you were in a small town, and everybody knows everything in a small town, right?
Right,
Small town,
right.
it's a little 200 people. That's only like 10 kids or 15 kids maybe. So you hear these stories, and how would they feel about a child who heals people, brings them,
Right.
who makes birds from clay, how would you feel about hearing those stories? Wouldn't you kind of be impressed? Wouldn't you be a little nervous of this person? Would you ever forget these stories? No. So, this is the Gospel of Thomas that people now, we found. It's what they call a Gnostic Gospel. It's written to people saying, we have special hidden knowledge that you don't know about, that the only way to get to heaven is with our knowledge, to get out of this evil place, this world, we're held captive here by this evil God, Yahweh. We have the secret way of getting you out. And we'll tell you these stories that are secret. Did they happen? No. But they wanted you to see Jesus as being this powerful magician. I'll use the word, I shouldn't. Even as a child. Well, then I ask you the question like this. If these stories were true, then maybe the folks of Nazareth would have treated Jesus differently later. How did they treat Jesus?
Well, they made it clear that he was a nobody.
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
We know of his mother, his brothers, and his sisters.
How would he come by this knowledge?
Yeah. And what did they do to him when he started talking to them, saying that you people will be cut out of this thing, that Gentiles come into the kingdom first? What did they do to him?
They tried to kill him.
Tried to kill him. They cast him out of the village, remember?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't remember that he was this great magician. They didn't know, because it never happened. Jesus was a young man. He grew up in knowledge as a regular child, not as some magician. The Gnostics wanted, that's why you have to take the Gospel of Thomas not too seriously, because they want to say a certain thing about him, but it wasn't necessarily history. What was Jesus? He was just a boy, doing boy things. But he was a responsible boy. He was the eldest, so he was helping his dad at work, even if it meant going to Sepphoris. Okay? And being the eldest son. Okay? However, the Bible records only a one-sentence summary. Like Samuel, Jesus grew up as Mary's firstborn son and learned the trade of his father, grew up healthy and obedient. And here's what it says in Samuel. Now the boy Samuel was growing in stature and in favor both with the Lord and with men. Same thing. One sentence to say it all. Questions, thoughts, or comments? If Jesus had done what the Gnostics said, the people of Nazareth would have been afraid of him. They would have thought him as awesome, and when they would never have dared to try to cast him out.
Yep.
I don't think it happened that way. He was simply a boy growing up, doing his duty under the law and as his family. And it's him, his brothers and sisters, we know they had both, regardless of how we understand it later, okay? And he was normal.
What we don't know is information like what was his personality like, how was he as a kid. I mean,
right.
We can assume normal, but we don't.
Yes, we do have personality we can work on. Number one, if you're the eldest child and you're respectful and growing in the Lord and you're doing the things you're supposed to do, you're a good child, a good son. And you're going to be polite to elders. You're going to help people. We know this. That's the way of that kind of a person should be. And this is what he was, guided by the Spirit. That tells us a lot about his personality. He was not a child with an ego problem. He wasn't growing up like the kings of, and such that we know of, Herod. Instead, he was a respectful, good Jewish boy. And that's the same personality we encountered later in his ministry. He tries not to do miracles to a point. He says, shut up, don't tell anybody. He's not trying to bring the focus onto him like a Herod would. Instead, he wants to help others.
Well, he clearly tries to bring the focus onto God the Father.
Correct. All the glory belongs to the Father, not to the Son. His whole focus is, when he prays to the Father. When he tells us, he says, pray to the Father. Everything is focused to the Father. And so, at the marriage feast, which we'll get into in a little while, it's not my time, but he still does something. Why? To focus them to look to the Father, to look to God, not at him.
Well, and it says specifically that the mother asked him to.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that because there are some issues about that too,
Yeah.
which we'll find, which is kind of neat. Anything else? Any questions, thoughts, or comments? All this happened between 4 and 7 AD. By 7 AD, he's an 11-year-old child, boy, the eldest of his family. There are brothers, there are male children in the family, and there are female children in the family. More than one, because later it says, we know his brothers and his sisters, plural. So if you thought that a family in a town of 200, a family only consisted of 5, you're probably wrong. You have the parents and the children, and you probably got a grandparent somewhere. So you're talking this, how many families is that? Even fewer.
Yeah.
Okay? And the children are going to have to do a lot more work.
Well, we also know that due to short lifespans, they had a lot of children. And a lot of them didn't survive, but they had a lot of them.
They had to have a lot of them because the children is their Social Security.
Yeah.
There were no programs for that. If you're going to be taken care of when you're old, you better have children to take care of you. Remember the woman the widow who lost her son? She was devastated because she had no one to take care of her.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the way it was at the time. Anything else? Not then, you can be aware that next, when we get together, we will look to Jesus at the age of 12, learning in the temple.